And we got that as well. So the meeting will please come to order. I'd like to welcome any guests we have in the audience and the members and the staff for our August 10th meeting. And the first agenda item is the meeting summary. It was distributed for your review. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes or summary? Yes, Anita.
Not exactly an addition, but a request. I noticed in the minutes that the member reports just named the people who gave a report, but not the content. And for me, the member reports are very important. They often have content that came from residents in a particular sub area. And I think that they're a way that a person who lives in one area on the DAC can find out about what's going on in the other areas. And we're supposed to all work for district-wide benefits. So it seems to me that the member reports should actually contain their content in the minutes.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. I concur. Who do we have to speak to or get a nod from?
I'll work with Jessica to see what we need to do to incorporate that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so that's that, the first action item, and then our second action item. So I'm glad we have this on here, and I wanted to make sure that we put a little context on this piece, because it's given our district advisory committee's purpose as representatives of all NCPRD residents is to provide recommendations to the board of directors of NCPRD on acquisitions, designs, planning, and development of parks and recreation facilities. These recommendations are to address the priorities of all district residents. In addition, the DAC will identify and prioritize capital projects and provide project recommendations to the board of directors. In our advisory role today, we recognize that the Concord Property Library Planning Task Force members are all NCPRD residents who were appointed by the BCC in 2017 and have worked planning, reviewing input of hundreds of residents and working with staff and architects to unanimously approve and submit in 2020 a master plan for the Concord Community Cultural Center, Park, and Library. And the master plan was approved by the BCC in January of 2021. So given the DAC focus is on park and community center and the community center building, and that the task force is focused on all aspects of the Concord project, it would be valuable to clarify the roles of the DAC and the Concord task force in participating in the design process to meet the residents' priorities and maintain a shared timeline as the project moves forward. So that's the context I wanted to create. I hope it didn't go too fast. But the point is, they did meet, and they did, they met the night after we did, and came up with an agreement to move forward with, which was basically, I don't know if that was going to be presented, but I can read it. I have it here.
I can read it for you, Chair. At the task force, the task force moved for them to approve locating the Concord Library in approximately the location where option 3 was additionally proposed, whether or not it's attached.
Yeah, and it makes no sense to say whether or not it's attached. So that I had, by the way, that didn't fit my recollection or several sets of notes. So I appreciate it. A little fine tuning.
Yeah, that's what Cindy Becker sent us.
Yeah, it's okay. I was in the meeting and that isn't exactly how it got said, but it's close enough. The only part I want to add to it, it really is deciding that it's approximate. It is in the general vicinity. So it's not going to be way over on the other side somewhere. And they were able to agree to that because there is room, and there was very specific comments about still not clear about where the entrances are going to be or how it interrelates with the park, et cetera. All of those were comments that are in the notes for people who took more complete notes. And I would request, well, wrong group, I'm sorry that it wasn't recorded. So point being, all we need to do tonight is to be clear what they had to say and their background. And then we need to look at, do we have any concerns or questions, comments about how we can provide our concurrence? Because so far we have only specifically agreed to
Chair, and Chair, point of order, just to clarify, this is listed as an action item for us to,
Correct.
for you all to discuss. There really
Correct.
should be a motion, motion second, and then you discuss the motion that you're asking for to discuss. So, and I'm just bringing that up as that is normal parliamentary procedure. I'm just giving you some advice on that. You can keep discussing it, but really to discuss the issue as an action item as it's listed in the agenda, there should be an action or a motion to start that discussion.
Okay, I see Anita's hand is up.
Okay. Here's my motion. In agreement with all 5 community groups consisting of district residents that passed motions about the library, park, and community center relationships, I move that the DAC concur with the Concord Task Force to locate the Oak Lodge Library at Concord as a freestanding building approximately 25 feet to the Risley Avenue side of the school building, with ongoing monthly input by the DAC and task force to fine-tune the library's final position in any direction and to weigh in on its footprint, library entrance locations, and integrated park and courtyard design features. And I could put that in the chat if that would be helpful.
Great. Is there a second to that motion? Are you going to second or do you want to comment, Commissioner Savas? You're muted.
I'll wait for the parliamentary procedure. I can't second it, so
I know.
wait. Yeah, I'll
I
just
know.
allow you to manage.
Okay.
it. I want to speak as soon as you can.
Very good.
I'll
All
second
right.
that.
Thank you, Ms. Suri. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, and now it's time for discussion. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, what was brought to my attention after the last task force meeting was the IGA, and some of the task force members spoke about the IGA that created the Concord Task Force. I have studied that, and we are nearing the end of one of the middle phases. And at some point, the transition to what the task force does will change dramatically here pretty soon. So I would say that, and again, I don't have it with me. I suspected that, or anticipated that maybe someone from the task force staff would be here, but I believe the next step is to, for the architect OPSIS to take the next steps to get things underway and come back with the fine tuning elements. It was not designed, the agreement, the task force IGA, if you will, was not to have a continual input and opportunities, because it won't meet the timeline. The timeline is such that we need to get this project ready to go at the same time. Ideally, at the same time the Gladstone project is scheduled to go forward. So our opportunity to build the library is on a schedule. I think the proviso that was in the motion might be a little bit problematic and raise perhaps some false expectations that there'll be ongoing input during the final design piece that OPSIS will doing. I think the next meeting was supposed to be to finalize that second step in the IGA, or the agreement, the task force agreement. So I said a lot, but I think most of the motion's okay, except for any I think there won't be a lot of opportunities to give a lot of greater input past the next meeting. After the next meeting, the office, the architects will be on their way to putting this project together.
Yes, Mike.
Again, I think Commissioner Savas spoke to it. I was going to discuss it more procedurally. The motion that has been made and seconded is asking for another group to do action, as in the task force being involved. And that's really just not appropriate for the DAC to do. All the board was looking for was a concurrence of the action that the task force took at the last meeting. And then there's a September 8th, I believe, is the next meeting that the task force will be gathered. At which time I believe there's going to be talk more of firming the location or giving some location options. I'm not quite sure exactly. I did not connect with Cindy on that point of it, but I believe that was the point of the next meeting. So I would say if the chair or if the motion maker would be agreeable to amending the motion to remove the provisions of the task force's action, the rest of the motion is appropriate.
Okay.
Yes. I'm fine with that.
Okay, so then to be clear, then it would be you're taking off the approximately 25 feet of the Risley Avenue side of the school. Okay, so now I have to say, having that I am on that task force from the very beginning and its formation, and I'm on the library board, and I'm on this group. And I want you to know the charter for the task force, we're not gonna have this conversation here in any detail, but I just want to know that the charter for the task force means the task force is in place until the building is built. And it has input all the way up through final design. And final design, in the meeting that with the architects, they said at that time it's at 30% of design. And we have architects on our group, and they said now is the only time that changes can be made, and they're not massive changes, but they aren't locked in, because if it doesn't happen now, it isn't going to happen. And these are things like how close or far back it is in relationship to the parking lot. And that doesn't affect anything other than it gets moved this way or that way. But what we have yet to have is a plan that gives what the park is, and that's something that matters to us. Yes, Joel?
I'm wondering if Anita could restate the motion as edited, because I'm getting a little, it's getting a little confusing. I'd like some clarity on the actual motion, please, Anita.
Okay. In agreement with all 5 community groups consisting of district residents that passed motions about the library, park, and community center relationships, I move that the DAC concur with the Concord Task Force to locate the Oak Lodge Library at Concord as a freestanding building approximately 25 feet to the Risley Avenue side of the school building, with ongoing monthly input by the DAC to fine-tune the library's final position in any direction and to weigh in on its footprint, library entrance locations, and integrated park and courtyard design features.
Okay. And Ms. Suri, do you, so, all right, fine. Yes, Mr. Savas.
Yeah, so I think it sounds like Anita read back her original motion. Is that correct, Anita?
No, she left out the task force reference as far as that they have ongoing.
Okay, so maybe Anita, if you could explain to me the monthly input on the project. I need to understand what you mean by that.
Well, because the park is such an essential aspect of the library, and we're a parks committee, it seems that we should continue to weigh in on design features of the park and how it coordinates with the library, because the park historically has been a little neglected in terms of it being considered important, but I think it's a really exciting opportunity to have a really imaginative outcome for the park and the courtyard that will be between the 2 buildings. Does that make sense?
Well, that helps a little bit, but let me just suggest maybe, let me think about that. So if the OPSIS is going to continue and doing the final development of this project. There is not any more time for them to be engaged. So if your suggestion of the monthly input is into another process about the park, certainly I would ask Mike then if there is a process for the park elements, but OPSIS will be, I think, focusing on the design of the library per se. But there again, there's no one here tonight, so I'm a little bit ill prepared. I was thinking that the motion would be similar to the motion made by the task force, and that was the library put in the proximity, not with any specific number of feet, in the proximity of option 3. So if there's an expansion of that desire to have a greater role, I don't know how that's going to fit or mesh into, because the Parks District, Mike and staff are going to have to take, I don't know what the process is for the park side. I'm just thinking that the work OPSIS is going to be doing is on the library, the footprint of the library per se.
And the park, go ahead, Mike.
They will, no. So Commissioner Savas, just to provide some clarity, my understanding is that as they're designing, as they come up with a location for the library, the rest of the property will then be able to be figured out. They can't tell us how much park space there's going to be or what kind of features a playground is going to have or what the square footage is going to be until we know exactly where the building is. And so my understanding is when they set the building or give the options, that will then, and again, there's not a lot of unknown quantity, folks. We've seen the maps already that approximately show where the park would be and approximately where the playground would be. Even as far as the design that everybody's talked about in the past months about the increased foliage and different plaza near the library entrance or other side from the entrance and things like that. So it's not that there's not been design work on the park. There's a landscape architect specifically on the OPSIS team that's doing the landscape architecture. They cannot plan for any park amenities until that library is set. So it should all be happening right about that same time. But to Commissioner Savas's point, I would say that the motion as it's been read right now would be fine if we add the words as appropriate. Because what I don't want to have happen is we can't slow the design process down. And that's why I think the September 8th meeting was set to go over the location with the task force itself, which will then, of course, we're going to keep bringing you updates on what's happening in the park designs and as that process goes. We're not going to cut people out of that, but there may not be a lot of other decision points, I think, is where Commissioner Savas is saying. Once we get to that point where everybody says, yes, this is the good design, which again is going to look very similar to the maps that we've shown in previous presentations. But the decision points, once we get that building fixed, that's going to set where the size of the park is going to be. That's going to set the playground location, the plaza, the parking lot, all of that. But until that building is fixed in place, everything else is malleable. And that's going to happen pretty darn quickly to keep on the schedule that Commissioner Savas was talking about. So we won't have several months of design talk. It's going to be happening within the next, I think, 6 weeks is what my understanding was.
Yeah,
so I hope that just provides some clarity.
Yeah, Mike, just for my edification and probably everyone else in this room, when do you see this board, the DAC and the district, taking a substantial role in the design of all the park elements on the property?
Well, what I don't understand is what elements are the park elements that are being talked about, because I'm not sure what we're talking about. We've seen design drawings already with where the building is approximately. Jessica, can you pull up, like, my screen share is not screen sharing. Can you pull up the map so that we can all look where we're talking about? But this is just an extract from, I think it was slide 15 from the last presentation that you all saw. And can we zoom in on? All right, so I mean, this is the overall layout. the talk of where the library is going to be, I believe, is really more up, down, side to side a little bit, but in that approximate location. But you can see if you move over the building to just looking at the map, I'm not going to use north, south, east, and west. If you move the new library building left, you're going to lose some plaza area. You're going to open up a wider corridor between the two buildings. If you can't move it up too much because we've got that hillside with that upper parking lot. So I'm not sure if it can go up there. Really, it looked like a lot of it was concentrated on that kind of bottom right corner where the entry is and how that entry plaza would look tied in with everything. But as far as the elements of the park itself, what we're seeing is what I'm assuming for the generality of what we're going with. And we haven't gone in and picked out individual playground elements, the play pieces themselves, but just see the area that the playground would be. You see the pathway that kind of loops around the outside. You see the general area of the park. All of that, I don't know how much finesse has been given to it right now beyond what we're seeing here, whether there's been significant changes. But this is pretty much, I mean, that's where I'm concerned, or I don't know what else in design of the park other than it's going to be slightly different size. Maybe there's a little different cutout. You see, we've got the adult that's still listed as an adult for a pavilion. I would assume that stays in there. So this is really the main design that we've been working off of. I don't see it being much different than this.
Okay, Missouri.
So I guess to follow up with your question, Mike, so there's no additional room for input regarding the park for additional comments, like, for example, a splash pad. Could we add a splash pad in the area? We're worrying about global climate change, things are heating up. Or the space, the arbitrary 25 feet, I know we don't know, it might not be 25 feet between the community center and the park. Is there any room for adding, say, chess tables in the middle, or additional coverage for rain so people can use those year round? Or so why I seconded the motion, when, if any, is there a time or place for additional input from the DAC to the features and aspects of the park that have yet to be planned, as we need to locate the library? When do we get our option, our ability to bring community input as to what finesse in detail they want to see here?
I have to defer to the board. I got here late into the project, and my understanding is a lot of that design work, this did not get created out of the ether. There was a lot of work with the task force and community engagement and what features and what else. To your point with the spray park, that is still listed in some of the documents as an add alternate feature that before I even got here had been removed for, I believe, cost consideration. But doesn't mean that it couldn't be added in, but all of those have costs associated with them. And right now we've got a cost that had been allocated for cost of playgrounds, park, open space. We're responsible for building all of that. The NCPRD, not a shared cost with the library. We're on the hook for the open play field, the playground, and the parking lot and entry plaza will be shared costs between us. So as far as the individual elements, things like extra shade, I don't think that there's been that talk. We've got a whole list of things that had been talked about as far as design features that were wanted from the park long before I even got here. And those were what are incorporated into these designs, because we tried not to change much of the design from the difference of it being attached to the building or detached from the building. So we could spend all kinds of time re-engaging and re-asking the community for what they want. But to move the project forward in a timely manner, we've got to go with the input that had been given and some finesse things. I don't know about chess tables. I know that if we wanted to have chess tables out there, they don't have to be poured in place concrete ones. We could add those design features after. Same thing about number of picnic tables and park benches. We don't need to get to that level. It's the idea of we're going to have X amount of square footage for open play field area. What could be done in that area? Not much as far as athletic play, but it's an open play field. The playground, I would put more effort into looking at the inclusive playground designs that were not talked about in the original design, and that I know for us to do would cost more than what is currently budgeted. But we're not at that level. We really just, before we can get to finalizing what has been designed based on prior community input, we've got to fix the location of the library. I can hear frustration, and I can kind of get that, but we can't keep reinventing wheels, all the time. We've got to go off of what information we've got. I hope that helps. I know it may not be the most satisfactory.
Okay, Anita?
Well, I've gotten feedback from people, and my sense of it myself was that for a long time, there was a lot of focus on details of the library and the community center, and that it was still just a sort of rough, vague idea of what was going to happen in the park. And that was still an opportunity somehow. It just felt that way. I guess that's pretty subjective. And then, there's so many inputs I've heard about people wanting a performance place in the park. And then I think the water feature is such an amazing part of an amazing option for a park. It makes a huge difference, I think, in how it draws community members there. And I think that courtyard between the two buildings could have, like Musiri said, the covering. It could have special kind of lighting because it might be pretty shady in there. It could have a grand sculpture. I mean, it just seems like there's a whole lot still waiting to happen on the green space around these two buildings, and that the Concord Task Force and the other groups were really zeroed in on the buildings originally, and that we haven't really gotten to the park aspect of it and how all the imaginative things it could possibly have that work with the library that maybe we can't afford, but we could at least look at them and then prioritize what we could afford. So I just kind of assumed that we could still really weigh in on the park aspect.
There's a comment from Joel in
Right.
the comments here. Joel says, I feel like we're straying away from the action item.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so I hear the comments, and I think this is the unfortunate result of a process that's been underway for several years, and the DAC being on hiatus. You are all here. Thank you. It's been a process in which the community at large has been engaged in these last several years, open houses and so forth. And so all that input to date has developed these elements here. I went and attended virtually all of them, so I do know that it was not just limited to the structures, but I don't know, I'm not here to say that the door is closed on opportunities that would be essentially, aside from the buildings, small adjustments to maybe some of the features. So I'm sure we'll have this tape recorded. It's recording right now. So I'm sure our staff who will be assembling the September 8th meeting will try to address some of these things. But it would certainly, I know, Mike, you already said it, and maybe there's a way to weave that in, but there is going to be opportunity for the parks, for NCPRD staff to be helping with this design. And there might be opportunities for the DAC. And again, I'm not here to say what that is or isn't. I don't know. we're just trying to get this project aligned and ready to go in time with the Gladstone Library, so the library elements can get underway.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to kind of sum up what I'm hearing here. The clarification is that the task force, to its knowledge, is in place, empowered by the Board of County Commissioners until the building is built, and which means their input is supposed to be there, and they did do a significant amount of outreach. And yes, we were on hiatus, and so they're the only ones focused on the library side, and no one really has had an opportunity, as was said, to look at the park side. And in the meeting that did get that agreement, they specifically talked about issues like the how much it does intrude into the park and what could be done to reduce some of that intrusion into the park. like moving it a little bit farther forward, et cetera. I don't want to get into the details of that, but that group has been, many of them been at it for 6 years, has a lot to be said, and that's what the process is supposed to be. Now, our job is we represent the residents. Everyone on those committees are residents of NCPRD, and they have done a lot of work. So their input is the thing that's going to drive a lot of these tweaks that we're talking about, and now's the only opportunity. So that's all I want to say. That's not up for us to decide, but this idea that we, as a DAC, because of the park and how it's affected, we are requesting, from what this says, that we get monthly updates, just like we have a monthly update on Milwaukee Bay Park or monthly updates on the SDC process, so that we know where things are and changes that have been made, as opposed to getting at a later time. I'm done with that. There's a motion and a second. Are we clear what the motion is? That's the part I want to be clear. Yes, Joel.
I am not clear.
I am not clear on the
at this
motion,
point.
and Grover, you said receiving monthly updates. The motion actually included language about providing monthly input, which is completely different. So I need Anita, please, to restate the motion again, because I am confused.
Go ahead, Anita.
To say it as I last said it, or to change it?
It's your motion, Anita. It's
Okay.
your motion. Yeah, I mean, you don't need guidance from Grover or anyone. It's your motion.
Or from
Yeah,
you.
but no, I'm just thinking of what Mike has said and what Paul has said.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know if I can help. I think it would help to strike the word 25 feet, use the word proximity. And you already have option 3 in there as the basis of what the guidance is, if you want to call it that. And I think to match Mike's words, have updates as needed from the DAC. Mike, is that about right? You're on mute.
I think so. It's hard to tell without a clean motion, and just, I hate to be the parliamentary procedure guy, but we're treading close on amendments to amendments to amendments. So we need to, if we don't get this one right, we're going to need to take a vote and either let it fail or let it pass and start again, because we've got a couple of limitations on how many amendments we make to a motion.
Well, the other option would be to withdraw the motion and make a fresh motion,
Correct.
which is, okay, so I don't know about this limit on, these are tweaks, and if we've exceeded that, then it could be withdrawn and resubmitted.
Either way, this would be an amendment to the amendment, which is fine. An amendment to an amendment to an amendment is not. So the motion could either be withdrawn and a new motion tendered, or we can try and get this one, and if it's good, then we can go with that. Choice is all of yours.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. In agreement with all 5 community groups consisting of district residents that passed motions about the library, park, and community center relationships, I move that the DAC concur with the Concord Task Force to locate the Oak Lodge Library at Concord as a freestanding building in the proximity of about 25 feet
No,
towards the Risley Avenue side. No, somebody says no?
well, Commissioner Savas suggested not put the 25 feet in there.
There's an active motion on the table, folks. If she wants to include the 25 feet, she can, but we can't really have discussion while the motion's being formed.
Okay. Okay, Risley side of the school building with ongoing monthly reports to the DAC maybe it's time to scratch this thing and let me just wordsmith it for a minute and throw this one out.
Okay,
And
so
do
are you
people really
withdrawing
think
your-
that is
are you
in
withdrawing your-
proximity, and approximately all that different? To you guys?
Point of order. Anita, are you withdrawing your motion?
Yes.
Okay. just trying to help Jessica keep notes clear.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, I will just gonna write stuff down so that I can read it better.
Okay.
Building,
Do we want to, in interest of time, table that until she has it completed and go on to the next item and then come back to that? Is that a legitimate maneuver
proximity. of the school
as
building.
opposed to listening to the,
Does anybody remember the wording that would work about not having ongoing monthly input by the DAC, but ongoing monthly?
I think it was as needed is what Michael said.
Monthly
Project updates as
updates. That's good. Okay. Thank you.
Chair, in answer to your question, it would be appropriate if we had other action items, but we're in the action item section and are getting ready to move to discussion item.
To
So
the
we really should
DAC.
wrap up action.
All
okay,
right.
fine.
About okay, I'm gonna give it a shot here. Takes a village, right? In agreement with all 5 community groups consisting of district residents that passed motions about the library, park, and community center relationships, I move that the DAC concur with the Concord Task Force to locate the Oak Lodge Library at Concord as a freestanding building in the proximity of the school building, with ongoing monthly project updates made to the DAC. That's it.
I second.
Thank you, Dave. Could I just rehear the part that came after Oak Lodge Library at Concord, just because I didn't quite get it all down?
Yeah, let's see. As a freestanding building in the proximity of the school building, with ongoing monthly project updates made to the DAC.
Okay. And those updates, okay, good, never mind. And it was moved and seconded.
I don't believe that motion was seconded yet. Oh, no, sorry, it was. David seconded. I apologize.
Any more discussion?
The as needed wasn't included, which was recommended by Michael, because if there's nothing to report, is that kind of the monthly report that there's nothing to report? Okay.
That would be my intent.
Okay. So, somebody who calls the question? It's,
You do, Chair. If there's no further discussion, you can call the question.
okay. So, Jessica, will you poll the
Yes.
members?
Joel,
I'm gonna abstain. I'm still a little fuzzy on this one.
Ms. Siri,
In favor?
Anada,
Yeah, in favor.
Katie,
In favor.
David,
For.
And if we can keep it to yes or no, because we actually have to record now everybody that said in favor versus yes versus I versus I guess so. So yes or no, if we could, just folks, I appreciate it.
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Ben,
I'm going to abstain.
and Grover.
Yes. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yes, and 2 abstentions. Motion passes. Next item.
All right, we'll talk about some STCs here. I'm gonna share my screen.
And while Heather's pulling that up, just for background for everybody, what we're looking at doing, I know I've had a chance to talk to the chair, but we had talked it last month about potentially having FCS, our consultant group here this month, to give you the outputs, the kind of end results that have been developed as far as the recommended numbers for SDC methodology. That wasn't ready yet. And so what I wanted to do is, since we have new members and just as a review, since the last time we have really looked at what is being considered with SDCs, it seemed like this was a good chance to do a really quick overview. We gave you all the packet, and if anybody has really in-depth questions about it, we can talk maybe off to the side or let us know after. But Heather's just going to do a kind of quick overview of what it is that we might be that we expect to be seeing next month in September when FCS is here. So thank you for that. Heather, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So today's really a very quick look back at what we talked about. I think it was in September when we did an overview of the SCCs and kicked off the process, and just a little bit of a preparation or preview for what you'll be seeing next month that wasn't completed in time for this meeting, but is getting really, really close. So again, just a brief recap. I'm just going to very quickly define our current methodology as a zonal methodology, talk about the updated data inputs, and how we're looking into the outputs of this process to give us eligibility rates and SDC charge rates. I'm also going to talk just a little bit about current rates and current eligibility, so you have a little bit of a benchmark. So it's kind of just background for next month, so it's not quite so abrupt and sudden, since we haven't talked about the technical part of SDCs in quite a while. And then I'll just recap the schedule. And again, especially in the interest of time with our agenda tonight, I want to be quick. So again, system development charges, this is a slide we've seen before, but they're one-time fees on new development, and they're paid by developers. They're used for growth, not maintenance, not projects that don't support growth. This is a diagram you can go back to, but basically it's just tracking the life of an SDC dollar from the place where it's charged to the place where it's collected to the place where we track it and we budget it and we use the funds. And so I really like this graphic. It's really straightforward. It's in your packet, and it's also in the budget book. The current methodology, as we've spoken about before, but particularly for the new members, it's a zonal methodology where you have different zones that have basically different charges and eligibility rates. And it's the same data inputs, it's just broken into zones. And that's what we have had since 2007. And it's what we have today. This map is just to demonstrate that in terms of the zones we have today, although this dark green of Happy Valley is no longer in the district. The updated methodology that we've been moving forward with is a uniform methodology. And that's based on some agreement that was reached in 2018 before this methodology was put on pause. And it basically said, let's have one district-wide fee across the whole district. That way we can commingle SDCs across the whole district to build the projects that serve the entire district. And although we have been setting up the methodology in that regard, that would be adopted with the methodology. So it's a presumption, but it's not yet adopted. And just a quick overview, when we talk about inputs into the methodology is only as good as the data that goes into it. So part of the buildup of this, and part of the reason it takes a while, is because we have to go back and update all our data, and in some cases dig for new data that might have been not included in the past. So things like an inventory of parks, facilities, natural areas, and trails. Things like population estimates that are always changing. Things like past costs that we've had for acquisition, planning, and development. And even our STC project list, which changes over time because we may acquire properties like the Concord property, or have agreements with schools about joint use agreements where we can develop on school properties. So we take that all into consideration and basically get it all ready for the consultant so they can plug it into a methodology And then that methodology can be robust in giving us some good outputs. We're not going to spend any time on the details of this. I just show it as a slide to say that the FCS will have a lot of information for you in the next month's meeting. And all I want to preview with is just saying that they will take some time to go through the major decisions, the summary outputs, but they'll also dive in and give you a little bit of weeds, just so you can kind of see how things were developed. But it is a multi-stage process in the methodology to move from the inputs and the analysis to the outputs. And this was just to kind of demonstrate that. So when we talk next month about the rates charged to a developer, I wanted to give you a little bit of context for that. So for today, we have the zonal methodology that was set in 2007. So we have zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3 rates. That's what we charge the developer when we say, rates ordinarily. And that varies based on single, multifamily, or non-residential. When we look at this next month, by then we'll have the numbers to show you that say, what is the district-wide rate? No longer zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, but what is a district-wide rate in those same categories? So we'll be able to compare what we have now versus what we've had in the past, and even look at sort of the escalation costs of our old rates, so we can compare them with this this rate that's coming out of the methodology in September. Whoops, did I go backwards or forward? Sorry about that.
Yep, still going backwards.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, what's going on with I'm moving my mouse and nothing is happening. Let me try this again. All right, can you see my screen again?
Yep.
All right, still can't move it. There we go. I guess I'm gonna have to go manually. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, and so the eligibility level for projects is kind of the other major output we have for this methodology. And what we have today is a fairly complex set of rates or eligibility levels that we talk about them in percentages based on the zone, but also based on the type of project, the type of property development. In this updated methodology that we'll be bringing you in September, we have a uniform district-wide methodology. So no more zonal differences, just eligibility rates according to the different types of different park types or different classifications, so to speak. So these big circles, that's what we're looking for next month. That's what we're confirming right now with the consultant, so we can give you that information. Okay.
Backwards.
Okay, last slide. Timeline is really very close to what I showed last time, but we're at this point in the middle where I've put a border around it, developing the draft SDC methodology. That work is almost complete. That's why we'll have it for you next month. We'll be presenting that to you for review. And at that time, the DAC, if you feel comfortable, can make a recommendation, or we can bring it back the following month. But the idea is that we're moving toward this last phase of an SDC ordinance notice period and hearing. So that's when, with a DEC recommendation in hand, we can go to the board, present it, set the start of the 90-day notice period, and also that concludes with the board holding a public hearing and considering the adoption of the SDC methodology. So that's everything for today, just to give you a preview. And I know we're tight on time, but I do want to just see if there's any questions.
Go ahead, Dave.
I just a couple of simple questions. When are the SDCs collected? When it's constructed or before, or?
Yeah, they have been collected historically at the time of application for the development. However, there is a law that is looking at changing that, but I don't think anything has been changed yet. Elizabeth, do you know offhand if that change has been made?
I don't think it's been made yet.
Yeah, so it's kind of coming down the pike. We'll see if that gets made, but basically it could possibly switch to the time the development's complete instead of the time at which the development permit is provided. And we pay these too. If we develop a property, we pay transportation SDCs and sewer SDCs. So all developers, public and private, pay these charges.
Yeah, it's a big chunk of money if you take those all together. But what's going to happen when this new process goes into effect, the new SDC? What happens to the money that's already been collected? The SDCs, do they stay within the zones, or do they all get commingled at that point?
They get commingled.
Because I mentioned in our sub area 4, there's been several large projects in the last year or two. Some of them still under construction. That my calculation shows over $1 million at least that would be collected for SDC. So I'm wondering where does that get spent at? Because in these areas here, there's a need for parks. There's nothing there at this point. So
Yeah.
I just wonder how it's all going to work out.
Yeah, so this is where there's just a lot of importance placed on the system plan that's upcoming, because in a district zonal methodology, you're just collecting money in a zone and spending it in a zone, again, according to your planning documents. But in a uniform methodology, you're taking all the collection in the district and you're using your guiding documents to distribute that. So it basically allows you flexibility to invest over time according to the plan goals. So say we have goals about making sure we have greater access to park for people who are missing access to parks, then we can direct money to those areas. It kind of depends on the goals and the outcomes of that plan. And that one of the tools for implementing that is our, say every 2-year CIP list. So there are several steps where you have what I would call guidance and safeguards to make sure that money is spent according to the goals that have been publicly reviewed and vetted and approved before you just go spending it on projects. If that makes sense. And that's how we spend money now. We can only spend SDCs on things that are on our SDC project list. It's just that it's from 2007, so it's not particularly updated.
Yes, Missouri.
Yeah, I was just curious. I saw Zone 1, City of Milwaukee has a lower rate for single.
Your voice went away, Missouri. I don't know what happened, but you're muted and it doesn't show you're muted. Yeah, can't hear you.
It cut out right up. I'm gonna take it. I think you asked about the low rate in Milwaukee, and okay.
You did.
So yeah, that it really is an outcome of the methodology that was done in 2017, which had different inputs at that time than we would have today, for example. It's going to change every time you redo the methodology. And although I was not involved in that SDC process, it's most likely due to factors like what was the rate of growth in that area? What was the population projected to be? What were the number of employees? What was the level of service already in that area? Because if things were going to grow, but we were already close to a level of service, if we're going to exceed that, we can't use SDCs on it, and we can't justify a charge for it. So again, it's a multi-factor analysis that goes together, but those would be some of the reasons why you might see a lower rate in one zone versus another.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, now
I
we
can
can.
now. Go
So
ahead.
did that get it, Siri?
Yes, that was my question. And a question about the methodology, are age, gender, race, income level, anything of those considered in that methodology?
Not in the methodology. It's just based on population, current population versus projected population. The place in which we would be considering a lot of different demographic, socioeconomic, equity factors would be in the system planning and the follow-up documents like the capital improvement plan. And so those are really, I think, our tools for then putting a lens on what are our priorities. Are we going to say we want a project, A, B, and C just because? Or are we going to say we want a project here, here, and here because we have equity goals or climate goals or things like that? So that's where all those lenses come into play. And that's my plug for making sure everyone stays tuned when we start kicking off the system plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I thought I saw another hand up. Did someone have a hand up?
Well, then I'll ask a quick question off of what Dave asked, because so the issue around that sub area 4, and actually it's not even true because we're going zones and what. So the unincorporated portion of zone 1 has about $4 million in their SDCs, which was alluded to in that conversation. Whereas the city of Milwaukee has around $2 million in their SDCs. And sub area that is in the unincorporated part, whether it be in the zone or the sub area, is still significantly park deficient and has been so since the 1970s and still is. So the question is, do they get the highest priority for using the SDCs generated in their own neighborhood? And if not, I see Mike saying no, then the question is, who decides?
The public through the system planning process, through making sure we have the goals and the tools to implement what people agree are the goals for our area. And so it becomes really incumbent to have robust planning documentation, robust participation. And that's why we're taking on this system plan, because it's out of date and we need to have a more robust, more current document.
But at its core, that goes to the difference of zonal versus non-zonal. You can't have a non-zonal levelized methodology, but still want to keep control within certain areas. It would really be the ultimate answer is it would be up to the board to make those decisions on where dollars are spent for SDCs based on the methodology that's adopted and hopefully guided by the input from the system plan needs assessment prioritization process. So I hope that clarifies. Zonal means everything gets rolled into one pot of money, and then by our policies and stuff that's created through the SDC methodology, then the board would be tasked with, making those decisions.
Agreed. And this is a group that actually advises the board specifically about those kind of choices. And that's why it's important for us to know more. Commissioner Savage, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to let everyone know, and I think I heard from Heather that the systems plan is aware of the demographics and I assume the level of service study that will take into account what facilities are there or not there, so that there's ideally at some point in the future, the North Star that says, let's level the area, let's make sure everyone has equal access, and so forth. But I would love, if that's where it's at, I see you nodding yes, Heather's, that's great. And I would love for us at some point, whenever that time is appropriate, to see really kind of a map of the district by precinct demographics or income levels. I think it'll be very telling about what the challenges are. And I really think that the populations in the lowest income areas should not be the lowest served in the district.
And that's one of the really nice things, Commissioner Savas, about the system plan process, because we hire consultants that can do what we can't do on a daily basis with very sophisticated spatial analysis. So they can look at the same time at demographics, distance to parks, and you can do some pretty sophisticated stuff. So rather than guessing, who's the most underserved, where's the most needed, where do we have some kinds of assets but not others, those type of analyses will help us so much. So I'm really glad you brought that up. It'll be extremely helpful for us to see that really plainly, because there's only so much you can get in words, and once you start having those maps, it's just a terrific way for us to all understand where we are.
Okay, Missouri.
And just for clarification, so when will the geospatial tools be used to draw these maps? I'm sorry, I missed the time frame there, because thank you, Commissioner Savas, for saying that, because that would be quite telling to see low income area, no parks, more wealthy area, many parks, just from red to green, whatever, pick a color, just drawing those geospatial tools. When is that going to take place? I'm sorry, I must have missed it.
Yeah, no worries. We've given a timeline in past meetings, but it's part of the system planning effort, or long-term planning, master planning, lots of terms we've used for that. But basically right now we're in the process of bringing on a long-term planner that can lead up that process. And so I'll be working with that person to make sure that we hit the ground running and start getting that process underway. So it's in our budget for this fiscal year, and we're kicking it off as soon as possible once we get that person on board. We'll be bringing on a consultant as well. So
yeah, and start to finish on the project, though, to be a bit more specific with less specificity, as we anticipate in at least 12 to 18 month system plan process.
Okay.
Once we engage with a consultancy.
Okay.
And community engagement is a big part of this, and it's more sophisticated than it ever used to be, because we just know more now and we know better. So there's everything from community-wide surveys to focus groups to large public meetings. There's a lot of tools, multiple languages, things that we just have to be pretty ambitious about it if we really want to understand what people's needs are, because not everyone comes to that one big public meeting. So community engagement is going to be a big part of the system plan. And it's a really exciting piece, I think, for our staff to be thinking through.
Okay. Any more hands up? Yes, Maureen.
Hi, thank you. I was kind of prepared to be a bit more jaded in the amount of money from the Zone 1 fees that were going to the Milwaukee Bay project. But subsequently, this conversation has given me some hope that once all the monies and the methodology might support looking at park deficient areas, my part of the Milwaukee unincorporated area. And, I really feel hopeful that those kinds of numbers, millions of dollars, could be generated in other areas, but spent here where there's certainly a serious need for open spaces, more community centers, parks. And I feel hopeful now. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Chair, may I add one more thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Just that when this methodology seems to magically spit out a number, it's really what they're trying to find is what is maximally defensible. Because you can't go to charge an SDC rate that's not based on anything or based on, made up numbers or bad information. So this methodology establishes that it is then the board's decision, with DAC recommendation at play as well. It is then the board's decision on what to charge. So in the past methodology, for example, those rates were suggested and the board approved those rates. But it can, you can go a lot of different ways. So I think being involved in the process is really helpful, because then the board will understand, what the needs are and the basis of the methodology as well.
Right. But just to clarify, as I'm hearing the timeline, which I'm still not clear, because we're having problem getting started through no fault of other than the reality of life and hiring and so on and so forth. But the reality is, until that's done, there's still money going to be spent, still under the zonal reality. And I don't know if the next page is the budget piece, but that it is where it's going to come up. What they're talking about, there's $4 million. And so I'll wait till the next item, because it's there. And the question is, who decides where the money gets used? And this group needs to make a recommendation on that, which means this group needs to have some sense of how that's determined. And I'll wait till the next section, which I think is the next thing on the agenda here.
Well, the next item is a past budget report, Chair, not future capital expenditures or SDC usage. It's just our past fourth quarter unaudited financial report.
Agreed, but in it does reveal that there is in fact $4 million in the unincorporated portion of Zone 1.
It's nothing's being revealed. That was in our budget documents.
I'm not arguing with it. I'm just saying it makes it clearly seen, and that is what Dave talked about, and that's what Maureen just talked about. That's all.
Chair,
Next item.
are you ready? Are you moving on?
Yes. Please move on to pre-audited fourth quarter.
Okay, so we have Elizabeth Gomez here today, our finance director, to present the unaudited fourth quarter financial report. So Elizabeth, if you would lead us through these pages, please.
Yes, and I hope you've had time to review this before the meeting, but this is showing at fourth quarter, so the end of June 2022, the balances in each fund. We have 4 funds, or 5 funds. Fund 213 is the general fund, which is what we use for our administrative costs, things like that. This is a text version of it, and then it's followed by the numbers. But you can see that the ending fund balance estimated at pre-audit for June 30 is 10 million in the general fund. You would see that estimate in the budget going forward. So that would be our beginning fund balance for this year, 22-23. The balance is also in each of the SDC funds, Fund 281, which is Zone 1 Milwaukee, and Zone 1 UGMA. Those are separated to show you the difference. Zone 2 and Zone 3, those are the balances in those funds. This does not show, and what would your budget document would show is what is planned to be spent out of those funds. So this is just telling you what was done in the past year. And then our final fund is the Asset Development Fund, which is Fund 480. And that encompasses both capital projects and capital repair and replacement, which we determine separately. So the balance of that as of June 30 is 7.4 million, which also you will see in your budget how we are going to spend some of that money in this coming year. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Mike, go ahead.
The pages beyond that are really just the details of those overall fund balances at the end. And there will be, Elizabeth, slight changes to the numbers as audit numbers come in, but generally these should track. There's not going to be gross changes, of large amounts. But as we get all the final bills paid and all the final revenues in, it's pretty close. Chair?
Yeah, I'll let Missouri go first and then I'll go after him.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess this might answer my question already. So once this is closed, we'll get additional detail as to why some things like came 152% over or under, just additional details as to what justified the numbers in the end.
If you would like that, we could provide that. The audit will be completed at the end of October. But we can certainly describe, why, if we're looking at current year taxes, why they're 105%. It's because we budgeted lower because of COVID. We weren't expecting everybody to pay their tax bill, but everybody did pay their tax bill. So this shows that it came in above the budget that we were expecting.
Okay, yeah, those are my, yep, okay. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
things like that. Yeah, those are my questions. Yeah, because know, if it's why did it come under or below, just like quick answers or quick justifications, which obviously you have, but aren't written in the document itself at the moment. Okay.
And just sorry, just so you know, the budget is created like in November, December, January, moving forward to the new year. So we are using numbers. We are using estimates that are given to us by maybe utility companies and things like that. We're using estimates from payroll, estimates on what programming we're going to have. So the budget as it sits is what we know at that time. Okay. The reports that you get that show what we've spent are actuals. So the budget, it could be that, we thought we were going to bring in $10,000 in concessions or something. Something happens. COVID happened, whatever. We didn't have a programming, something in the park that year. So that revenue may come in at $5,000 or something, but it's easily explainable just so that what the budget, how the budget is based.
Got it.
And how actuals really come in.
And that missing details is what I'm looking for. Yeah. But it's not, you're not done. So it's clear now why it's not there. But if it appears later in another meeting, that would be fantastic.
Well, and I would just, I guess, provide the yes and to, if there are specific areas, we can go, we could spend a lot of staff time going through line item by line item and saying, well, our special use permit fees are up 542% because we had more anticipated permits than not. What I try and do is give you, not generalities, but kind of clusters. Trending, if you look at this overall, is overall our revenues came in higher than expected at 115% of our expected overall revenue. And our overall expenditures were 80% of what was expected. That's if you are interested just based on curiosity, I don't want to necessarily have to go through every line item that comes in above or below, but generalities, that's what we'll provide at that audit report. But if you have specific ones that you're particularly interested, let us know.
Okay, I'm just wondering, not to duplicate staff's time, but if during a staff meeting, that information that I just asked for happens and it's easily documentable or can easily be documented and transferred into a format we could receive, that would be fantastic. But not to waste staff's time to go do extra work. But if that takes place and during a meeting, great. But yeah, or maybe every bold gray item, you know, so it's a cumulative would be fantastic, but some descriptive detail.
Hey, and actually, I'm glad I let you go first because that's pretty much in the same vein. So I've been on the library board for 7 years now, and we started getting numbers looked a lot like this, and we requested and now do get a fourth of a end column that if there are things that are significantly not as planned, there's just a brief explanation. We are not in any way accusing or whatever, but we scratch our head because our job, as I see it, both on that board and on this board, is that we are representatives of the people whose by and large money this is. And we'd like to know, just like my wife wants to know when all of a sudden things went way out of whack, just an explanation, not an accusation. So I would very much appreciate if we could add a column that on the right that actually just put brief notes to explain things that are not as expected, not little, not as expected, but big ones. There are many big ones on this screen. So that's all. And so I think that's an agreement with what Masuri just said, and I requested, and it works. And by the way, in the I know it's library, but in what works is we have a subcommittee on the library board that cares about this, and we meet briefly with the staff a couple times a year to get updates and ask questions and so on and so forth, just so our curiosity is satisfied, not as an accusation. So I just want to be clear about that.
We're going to be, yeah, our intent though, as we've done since at least I got here, is we're providing you all quarterly budget reports. That's the time. I mean, if you have questions about, you know, the items, those quarterly reports, I want to remind us, everybody, we do have a budget committee that is for NCPRD specifically. And there's a vacancy, there's one vacancy, right, Elizabeth?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a vacancy on that. And that's the group that's supposed to really dive into the budget details when we're going through this. And this is not the time and place to discuss all of that.
I disagree with you, just being very clear. Our job is to be able to make recommendations. And if we don't know, the budget committee is not us. Our charter is. And so I still would like to be able to have some of those notes, whether everybody cares or not. That's why we have subcommittee meetings in the library side. But it isn't, that budget committee has nothing to do with our accountability. That is a different group altogether. Don't want to have that conversation now. The request is still there that significant things, just like Masuri said, if you already know what they are, it'd be so easy to put in there in a note as opposed to line by line, not asking for that. Things that are distinctly not what expected.
Your point has been made, Chair, and I've agreed to that already.
Okay, good. I'm sorry I missed that. I misunderstood. I thought you said this is what we were getting. Good, good, good. Thank you. Anything else on that? Questions? Next item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your time. In your packet, I included a staff report on the issue of should the NCPRD be considering a park-wide smoking ban. I won't go into all, I'm not going to read the staff report to you, but generally speaking, we get complaints on a fairly regular basis. One came in most recently in early July about smoking, cigarette butts, secondhand smoke, what have you in parks. We currently don't have any kind of a ban on smoking. The difficulty, as I kind of touch on in the report, is we also don't have any enforcement ability to assess a fine or put an actual prohibition. We could have, and what we're asking for you all is, not should we have this tonight and figure everything out. Should we pursue what our options are is really what I'm asking, so that we can develop some sort of a policy guidance based on what you provide, that then we would ultimately be taking to the board for them to pass as an action. And I think I'm trying to flip back and forth between my different pages, but I want to reviewing. So the three options as I lay out, and again, enforcement is difficult. You know, people's reaction to saying, you know, there's a ban on smoking is difficult. People will often go and not take up smoking and go to the parks, but specifically go to parks just to, you know, thumb their nose. There's a lot of issues. I know in other communities that I've worked with, when we have instituted any kind of smoking ban, it has been based on a statewide Clean Air Act or other initiatives that we were able to draw off of and say, based on the state statute that says that there's, in the state of Alaska specifically, there's no smoking, vaping, or other use like that allowed in any public spaces. And it even gets further on to define what, you know, public spaces, but basically it gave us the overall blanket to say there's no smoking in public parks, and it's based off of the state statute. We don't have that here. I'm not suggesting that we look to try and hop on a clean air stance. My staff recommendation as we lay out the three options here is, you know, we don't take any action. We don't introduce any new policy or any new signage about smoking. We just let things go, and we'll still continue to get our occasional complaints, and staff does a really good job about going out and cleaning up the cigarette butts and all of that, and they'll continue to do so. So no change whatsoever. Second is introduce courtesy signage, requesting people not to smoke. We can word it a lot of different ways. I've just provided a couple of examples of thank you for not smoking, or thanks for clearing the air for our kids, or, you know, there's ways that you can say where you're just asking people or thanking them for not doing the activity, not saying you can't do the activity. Or we move forward with gathering more information to develop a no smoking actual policy. And again, the problem with the policy creation is we don't have a fine schedule, nor do we have any enforcement ability. We don't have rangers on staff that would be going around issuing citations for anything. And I'll be quite honest, adding an additional burden of trying to get police involved for smoking violations, the police aren't going to come out for something like that. So I always love to not create more policy or create rules that we can't enforce. So my recommendation is, if you want to do anything, that we would look at the courtesy signage. But I wanted to bring it all to you. We had the complaints from the public, and that's what I told them I was going to be doing, is bringing it for you all to discuss and guide us.
Great. Are there any questions? Yes, Missouri, and then Anita. Go ahead, Missouri.
Have other parts of the metro area I believe City of Portland might have something in play. Have we reached out to them to ask what was a calamity of a failure, what was fantastic, you know, before we start marching for, we're not saying we're marching for, but as like additional information gathering?
Yeah, the local areas, I guess to summarize the general consensus is the communities that have the ability, or the districts or communities that have the ability to enforce, have more robust no smoking policies. So like City of Portland, they have their own whole set of you know, enforcement that they can do because they've got the staff to do that. Tualatin Hills has a no smoking policy, but I believe it's part of a larger jump on something that the city of, or I guess it would be, yeah, I can't, there's an overarching policy that I think they're basing theirs off of, similar to what I was talking about in Alaska. It's really kind of scattered, but I would say most of the information that I had seen so far was not really trying to deal with it unless you're willing to deal with it, you know, fully. I think the courtesy signage is kind of the good midway point. We're getting the point out that, you know, we're thanking people for not doing something or asking them not to do something. I don't see that even an outright ban, anything that we would do, park staff are still going to be cleaning up cigarette butts. People are still going to smoke in the parks. People are still going to get upset by people smoking in the parks. So any of the measures that we take is still going to have that as kind of the end out. And so I want to do the thing that makes the most sense, you know, procedurally, and with an eye towards staff time.
Okay, yes, Joel.
Just to offer my opinion on this, I think no action is the most appropriate. I think even providing courtesy signage is a waste of resources. There's courtesy signage that ask people to pick up after their dogs, and people that don't want to pick up after their dogs aren't going to pick up after their dogs. I think in the interest of even time in this meeting, this is an issue that could easily be, it's not being disregarded, but it's something that would be ineffective even with courtesy signage, in my opinion. And those resources, even those few small dollars, could be devoted somewhere else in this district that is in desperate need of money.
Thank you for that, Joel. Anyone else? Okay, I have thoughts. I actually look at it because I did check. Portland's had a ban since 2015. The state of Oregon, the only place you could smoke is in your vehicle or in your personal camping unit, or your portion of there's a certain portion in day use places, but it's all designated. And if we don't at least at some point move forward on that, businesses make people go outside to smoke, as an example. That's a state law. You can't smoke in an institution. You can't smoke in a club, any of those things. So it's not a new idea. And I actually would be inclined to put your second point as the thing that we move forward on, and then pursue what it would take to ultimately do it, but not fast track. But if we don't ever address it, we're going to have the world run by other people. Yes, Katie.
I just want to say, I actually agree with what Joel is saying, that I think it would be a waste of time and resources to even put signage out at this point. I just don't think that it really makes a difference for people. They're going to do what they're going to do. So that is my stance on that.
Thank you. For me, on the dog thing, because I live one door over from the trolley trail, and those signs are up, and you see the people who do and the don't. But the thing about having the signs up and having a place for people to dispose of those things encourages more people to do it. And do we have a place where people could put cigarette butts in a park? Because otherwise we have them going on the ground because there's no place to put them. That's piece one. And two, nobody's talked about the fire hazard with the extreme dry weather we have. How many fires are started by discarded cigarette butts that weren't out? So I just want to make sure that's included in this conversation.
Yeah.
Any other?
Overall, from an operational side, I have to look at, whatever mechanism. If we do nothing, obviously that's easy. But if we move towards enforcement, there's always going to have to, or towards policy, there's going to have to be the discussion of how it's enforced, and that's the difficult part. We could institute a ban, as soon as the board would do so. But if we don't have teeth to have a fine system in place for that, to have a process, both for appeals and all these other, what we would really have to do is back into what county, Clackamas County could do as far as code enforcement or something along those lines. But it's not an easy discussion. There's a lot of strong feelings, which is when we replied to the email that we had gotten of this angry person most recently. Our response was, we don't have a fine system in place. We don't have a current policy or ability to enforce. And they came back fairly strongly in their response, basically calling us out on BS, for lack of a better word, that that's not good enough. And that's why my reply to them is, okay, that's our kind of standard stance right now, but let's bring it to the DAC to discuss. And I fully would support not taking any action, because I can say to anybody that comes and asks that we've had this discussion at the DAC level.
Yes, Commissioner Salas.
Yeah, fascinating topic here, actually. I recollect back when smoking was banned in bars and taverns and so forth. And I think it was the big fear that, business would just kill taverns and so forth. And actually what it turned out to be is that it actually boosted their business, because a lot more people actually would patronize those places because they just felt it was just nicer. And I don't think anyone really would advocate for flipping it back to the old way. But one thing that I might suggest is, you know, we could offer to do, and that is maybe bring in one of our legal counsel to talk about enforcement and how a ban may or may not work, and just kind of have a reality check. I don't think it's worthwhile. I heard a couple people say it, to chase down an occasional person that lights up a cigarette. You never see him again. We can't afford to police the entire facilities. However, if there are people that frequent the facilities and they're more habitual in the ways, whether it's, you know, not cleaning up after their dog, or it's, you know, cigarette butts or so forth, we got to remember that a lot of the assets in the district are environmental assets. They're not just places for people to go, but they're environmental assets. So, you know, we have our share of wildlife, you know, whether it's cigarette butts or, you know, dog waste or animal waste or whatnot. That's got an impact in the stream. So we have a responsibility, actually, by the way, for the water quality for the assets that run through this district. So you know, we could, as an example, if someone is a habitual, is violating any kind of a law in Clackamas County, we're using this for the businesses a little bit. You can actually implement, if you can identify that person, an exclusion ordinance. If there's one in place that says if there's repeated offenses, they'll be excluded from the premises for whatever period of time that may be. But that could be something that legal counsel could advise you all on what the options are. But I'd like to see us be a little bit more environmentally responsible and make our parks a place where people want to be, and not for a place where people want to perhaps avoid or have people to avoid. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Salas. I appreciate that a lot. Yes, Missouri.
I understand how it might be difficult to enforce, but I think we should also be promoting health. Parks are a very important part in people's mental health, physical health. So we do know cigarettes and tobacco usage just cause, you know, cancer if used prolonged. Most likely, might not in some individuals. But I also understand, you know, like you want to operate a motorcycle. That might be a little bit more risky than a car, sure, but it's a choice, and we allow that as a choice. So I guess it is a fine line, but promoting health, I think, is something we should consider with whatever decision that goes forward. That random comment.
Thank you. Yes, Joel. Oh, where'd you go? Joel, you're still muted.
Pardon me. Following
okay.
up on the last comment there, Missouri, and even to Commissioner Savas, I'm very wary of creating another layer of government policy that really could open up a bit of a rabbit hole with relationship to health. We should probably start looking at banning sugary sodas entering our parks in the same vein. I obviously being a little tongue in cheek here with respect to the environmental impact. Then we're going to be banning you know, marijuana usage, cigars, pipes. How specific are we going to have to get on layers of that? Will barbecues be allowed in our parks because of the fire hazards? And all of this is an unenforceable at the time or at this moment, an unenforceable policy that we're considering. I think the nuisance is real, and I'm sure it bothers people, and I'm sure they're vocal to NCPRD staff. But I think for the sake of this committee, it just doesn't seem like it's very fruitful to pursue something. I mean, I would certainly be interested in hearing what legal counsel has to say on this, but I think it's going to open up a giant can of worms that I don't necessarily know that needs to be opened up just for the sake of creating more policy for the sake of policy.
Okay. Yes, Ben, you're up.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate the conversation, and everybody's points of view, I think, are all valid. I mean, my perspective is that people go to parks to smell fresh air and connect with nature, and that's pretty much ruined by the smell of cigarette smoke. And no matter what we vote today, if it does, or where we are today, it's going to eventually happen. You know, we just got to think, are we going to start making strides towards it now, or are we just going to kick the can down the road till we're the last place on earth where people are still allowed to go into parks and smoke? That's just all I have to say. But I do agree with the resources and the policing. Even if you put up the signs, I just don't think I don't think Portland polices it, to be honest. Like, I work downtown and I'm on the waterfront all the time. And I mean, talk about secondhand smoke. I mean, that's where it all is. So, but it's also like a community policing thing too. You put the signs up and people may become more discreet about it. You know, if there's just a few less people smoking out there, it makes more people's lives enjoyable when they go to the parks.
Okay, so I don't know how we move forward, because I think we're just considering this. We have considered it, and I appreciate that we have an opportunity to explore how moving forward. I don't know where to go with it. I don't think we should make it a ban, and but like, I appreciate Ben's perspective. If we don't move in that direction, and several other people talked about that same thing, Commissioner Savas, etc. So I'd like to, so if we start with legal counsel, I don't know if that's a place to go and what they give us, but in truth, it really is about taking care of the resources and the people and their health. And, oh, Anita, I saw your hands up. Sorry, I didn't see it till now. You're still muted. There you go.
Yeah, I just put it up. I was just thinking that, are we going to change all the signage to allow for camping in the parks? Because that would be an opportunity where we're already going to spend the money to make some signs. Maybe we'd want to put that, thank you for not smoking, on there. And, but yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in the fact that people would change their behavior very much, just like when it comes to dogs on leashes, you know, it's pretty much a free for all. But maybe it affects some people and not others. I don't know. But I just thought if we're about to spend money on signs, we could consider it. That's all.
Okay. Yes, Dave.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's have a thank you for not camping sign. I think that's what we really need in our parks.
No.
And if I understand correctly, that's actually going to be not allowed, period, right? Not even the thank you. It's going to be, Mike, is that correct? We're not going to have.
No, and I can bring you a more robust report, because I want to make sure that I'm up to date with legal and Kevin Case and our park director. No, right now I believe our rules signs say no camping, and because of legislation, we can't prohibit camping purely as an activity, because that infringes on the rights of the houseless and homeless. I believe what we're working towards, and again, I need to follow up to verify this, is the signage that I think Anita is talking about, that we had discussed, changes some of the ways that we list our rules. So instead of, it's not no camping is allowed, but we are going to hopefully have the signage that speaks towards the county's littering policy, and establishing hours of operation at each of the parks to say, you know, the park is open from, you know, this time to this time. If you're in the park after those hours, you're technically trespassing. And so it's a lot of fine finesse detail in how we list rules, especially as it relates to trying to curb, you know, overnight activities, things like that. I can bring you more information. I just don't want to get more of it at this point, because I want to make sure I've got the best info. Okay, good. And if I understand you correctly, then, so that you are leaning towards there will be signage change in the future. Yeah, okay, there's actually money in our budget to do that this year. Whether there's enough time, I don't know where we're at in that process. That's what I need to check with to see what the status update is. Okay. Whether there's that's going to be much more of the park rules sign. So I don't know, again, how appropriate it would be for us to put an expectation of thank you for not doing something on our park rules of here's what we expect. But yeah, that's why we're bringing it to you all. I have no problem if you would like, as the next step, to talk to legal. I'll speak with our legal counsel to get just an idea of what could, you know, come through. as far as what possibilities there would be either at a county level or a district level. And I would, but if we want to do that, I would also want to include information on estimated costs of staff time to do an activity that everybody here has already recognized probably wouldn't be very effective, if at all, because there would be a lot of staff time involved in developing a new no smoking policy itself. So I just want, if you want me to do that, I can, but I want to have that information out there as well. If we're all recognizing that an outright ban is difficult, if not outright to enforce, I want to talk about the amount of staff hours that would be spent in developing that.
Right. And I don't think there was any recommendation for it being an outright ban at this point. Yes, Joel?
Yeah.
Well, in this light, if there's any pursuit of anything here, including even courtesy signage, I would be interested in actually seeing statistical analysis of the amount of complaints from secondhand smoke, if that secondhand smoke is tobacco, if that secondhand smoke is some other product, if vaping is included in that. And just to make it more fun, I'm sure there is an equity issue laying in here because the demographic of smokers is well known that it's typically lower income or minorities, people of color. And so that might be something we want to consider as well if we're going to start some sort of exclusionary policy based on personal behavior.
Yes, Commissioner Savas. Thank you, Joel.
What struck me here a little bit, and maybe Mike, this might be advantageous just to put balance in this conversation, is to find out what is prohibited in the parks today. I mean, for example, can people just dump garbage there? To assume that they can, or that we should say, thank you for not dumping your garbage. I mean, if there's not clearly a ban on dumping garbage, let's just say, for example, I would be concerned that there's not the ability for a habitual frequent flyer who is violating the rules consistently not to be pursued. I would be concerned about that, as well as if there is some kind of discussion about, you know, how fast, you know, what mile per hour can people travel down the trolley trail? What is an allowable speed? If we say, thank you for not going 40 on your electric bicycle, you know, we have complaints about that. I heard that quite frequently at the Trolley Trail Festival about people on electric bikes, even bicycles that aren't electrically powered, zooming past people and scaring them. So that does not make the park the pleasant, peaceful, tranquil experience that one would expect. But I think it could be a good idea to find out what is banned, so we put it all in context.
That's a great idea.
How about this? It may not be next month, but either September or October. Before then, I'll talk to legal. I'll get a bit more context of what could be done and what our existing regulations are. And Commissioner, to your point, you know, like the litter, you know, there's illegal dumping code violations within the county. But there's, and I believe even the littering, which is different than illegal dumping, is, you know, again, those are fine violations, but not criminal things that a law enforcement officer is going to come and remove somebody, you know, forcibly for dropping their, you know, garbage bag in one of the parks. So I think coming back with a bit more context of what we're talking about, I can do that. We'll bring something back to you. I'm going to guess in October.
Okay, good.
And if I can, just one last thing, and you know, and maybe have an explanation of what the exclusion ordinance can do as a tool for habitual violators. If you have that, I mean, that's a tool that, you know, you can't arrest someone if you don't have a trespassing sign, and you're not going to arrest someone because they come and knock on your door. But if there's someone who is trespassing on your property day after day after day, then you can do something. So the exclusion ordinance has some strength that can handle some of those unique circumstances where people are frequently abusing a particular rule or law or ban or whatnot. So just throw that out there, that it might be educational for folks in this room to know how effective that is or is not.
Correct. And the library uses exclusion ordinance as well. Okay, good. So we'll hear back in probably October. Thank you so much. Thanks for the good conversation, everybody. It's not an easy task, but most things that are worth doing aren't easy. Next item, status update on Adopt a Park program.
There's a hand raised, actually,
Oh, where is it?
in
No.
the attendees.
Oh, I got it. Well, we're almost to public comment, but we're not there yet, so I don't know quite how to deal with that.
Yeah, it's really public comment for any comments
Okay,
from
good.
the body.
So whoever has your hand up, can you hang on? We'll get to you shortly.
They put their hand down for now.
Oh, thank you. Okay, status update on Adopt a Park program.
Yeah, so just a quick update, because since our last meeting, I've had a chance to go in and look at our our past Adopt a Park process. And it needs some significant structural changes. And so we're in that process right now. Nothing that completely overhauls, but the old policy was very much kind of an open, what do you want to do at the parks to adopt and make improvements and beautification and stuff. And I'll be quite honest, at least the difference between then and the environment that we're in now is really, we can't have a lot of people out in the parks operating string trimmers and doing beautification efforts and stuff. What we're really looking at is an Adopt a Park, Adopt a Trail program is for beautification, for litter pickup, for cleanup, occasionally maybe a larger project as necessary, but we need to change the way that we have people signing up, because it very much opens up, I think, leading people into not false beliefs of what they would be doing, but it also, I think, is putting some onuses on any groups that would be wanting to be involved. So I want to make it a streamlined, easy application, easy tracking. Right now we have a monthly tracking system that was in place before, and you had to send us an actual filled out form, and I want to make it streamlined. So I'm hoping even as early as potentially next month to bring you a draft plan or a draft structure of the Adopt a Park system. Just wasn't ready for this month.
Okay, good. Adopt a Park in September. Great, thank you. Next item is the changes or status updates. And so we'll start with Milwaukee Bay Park.
Yeah, at this point, I really don't have any more or any status update other than, things are still happening on project finalization document stuff, but there's not really been any other forward motion on that.
I have a question then. What is the update on Milwaukee's withdrawal from the district? Because I know that was brought up and it does affect, and there's several things that need to be done one way or the other. So any update on that?
Nothing that I can really provide at this point.
Okay.
The actions that the city had discussed last night and all of that. You can read their staff report, but I'm in the position where I really can't presuppose anything. All that's being looked at, as I think I talked about it maybe last month or the month before, is the issue is still being questioned on what the options are for the city of Milwaukee to withdraw. And if they were to do so, what happened or what they were discussing last night would be some of the provisions of what could happen with that. But no decisions have been made. That's, I guess, the best update I can provide is no decisions have been made. Staff and legal counsel and county administration, we're all working on working through this. But as it is right now, nothing has changed. So we're moving forward with projects and we're maintaining everything. We're doing the job until there's a decision at some point to not or not. So as things are, I'm reporting on how it is right now. Not a lot of Milwaukee Bay Park project itself.
Thank you. Okay, so that's Milwaukee Bay Park. Concord, I think anything addition that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, the only, we talked about kind of the Concord project overall, but for the infrastructure stuff that we have discussed the last couple of months, just a quick update. I've met with OPSIS. Jason Vargas working with OPSIS to get better prices, better scope elements for the pieces that we had talked about. Trying to refine that more. I can't tell you that we'll have a report that has more specific next month, but that's my hope. It's really going to kind of be on OPSIS' schedule because they're still working on the library and all, both libraries and the other project as well.
I have a question. Why are we doing that through opposites? Because they wouldn't be doing the work nor the engineering for it. So, and I think they add an extra cost, piece one. And piece two, I know that when you made your presentation before, there was questions about whether the roof and the walls being done at the same time versus separately would be significantly more expensive if they were separate, but we don't have the data for that. So that's my question about all that you just spoke of.
I'm focusing on the scope as it was presented to both you all and the board, which does not include going out doing wall seismic upgrades. That was asked, and we've got the number from OPSIS of what that would cost. What I'm scoping right now, and the reason that we're going through OPSIS is because we've already paid them quite a bit of money to do a lot of this work already. Now, ultimately, whether they do the construction, I don't know if that's been finalized, but we're in existing contracts that I can't just say, things have changed, so no, we're no longer doing that. What we've tasked OPSIS with is to look at those elements, the roof replacement, the structural up or the seismic upgrade at the truss level, the electrical panel upgrade, the elevator upgrade, and those other pieces that are part of that. To go back and look at it and try and recalculate a cost on something else, we're not at that point, and I would have to get guidance from my boss and others before we tried to refactor any of that. We can provide you the numbers; those are all in the old reports of what that costs to go out to the bare walls structural. What I am hoping is we're trying to get more context from the structural engineer that's part of the project to give us an idea of where the building is right now, what that to the walls upgrade would have gotten us to a level, and what this method is getting us to the level. But I don't have that information right now. That's what they're working on right now.
Okay, thank you. And then SEC methodology, I think we've already covered that. Yes. Okay, and then NCPRD funding, any updates on new funding or what? Okay.
No, there's just the fourth quarter report. We're still,
right.
Some of our concern, our struggle is we have to work with the county system as far as like new positions that we have authorized, different things. We have to wait for the process. So things are moving forward in trying to put our new budget into place in some of those areas, but not as quickly as I would have hoped. But that's really about the only thing outside of the fourth quarter financial.
Okay. And the system plan, I think you have in the report, so we can, we've read that. And by the way, kudos. Thank you so much for the information that you put in the report about the steps that have been taken and the things that have gone. And congratulations on the intern and congratulations on the planner. And I'm thrilled to know those things. And thank you for including that in keeping us informed. So thank you. And thanks for putting in that report. And the CIP timelines are already been covered as well. Yes. Okay, Good. Thanks. Okay, any changes that I haven't mentioned or thought about or whatever? Okay, moving right along. Public comment. We have the opportunity.
Jan Carruthers has her hand up.
Okay, please call on Ms. Carruthers.
Mute herself. Thank you. So I have to say, some groups have public comment after major topics, and that's why my hand goes up frequently, because I might have something to say. I do notice that chat is disabled, and it hasn't been in the past. And one of the ways that we can stay involved is to be able to put an idea in chat. So I'm just curious that it's disabled. I have 3 quick things here. That was one of them. The second one is regarding the smoking ban. I think that even if you all voted for it and you got the legalities on it and you got everything, having been at a Board of Commissioners meeting in which they were recommended by county administrator regarding short-term rental fees and consequences for short-term rental fees, they decided not to take action on that, to not do that. Frankly, for the same reason Mike talked about in terms of staff time, structure, all of those things. I don't think an enforcement issue of an enforcement structure is really the issue. I think it's public education and behavioral influence. And it occurs to me that since we are youth oriented, we're parks, it is very possible to do something kind of creative like the Water District has done, which is have an art contest for kids doing art signs, slogans, that kind of thing. If we're going to invest in signs, and I'd rather invest in signs than trying to create an enforcement structure. I'd rather get a new park. But signs, I think, we do interpretation on a lot of things. So the signs could be about keeping the air clean, keeping the park free from fire hazards, keeping the park free from dog poo. You know, I mean, do you see what I'm saying is that if you get kids doing it, then suddenly it's an issue that outreaches and also involves people in the park. The Water District can do it. Maybe we could do that. Just saying that there's more ways. And I do understand the idea of creating an enforcement structure, but we don't really have the money, and we're just going to have more parks and we're not going to have anybody there. So I think it's really useful to count on people beginning to shift their behavior by social influence. It's a thought.
Thank you. Any other hands up? I can't see them, so I don't know if they're up or not.
No other hands right now, Chair.
And is there a reason that the chat is disabled for the public comment? I didn't know we were planning on disabling their ability to communicate.
Jessica, I'm not aware that we've had chat enabled for the public.
Yeah, I haven't changed any settings for setting up Zoom, so I don't know if there was a default setting that somehow switched, but I haven't switched any of the settings for setting it up, but I can look into that.
Okay, thanks. One of the things that we encourage is to have the public participate, and if they can't speak at times, they can at least put comments in the chat. And I don't know how that structure works. So thank you if you'd look into that, Jessica. No more public comment. Thank you so much. Okay, DAC member report. I repeat my kudos. Yes, Anita.
Well, this is kind of going to feel like the smoking issue, but at Rivervilla Park in my sub area, I've been approached by people from several households of people who live really close to the park, saying that since COVID started, especially some of the behavior has changed in the use of the park, and there's a lot more people coming late at night, having loud music, not too many fires, but they sometimes have modified mufflers on their cars and they race up and down the hill, and that it's different than it was a few years ago. And so some of the people who live close by the park are dreaming of an automatic gate closure, which I guess happens at North Clackamas Park and also at the end of the boat ramp on Oak Grove Boulevard. So I don't know what to say about it.
Other than that is not a unique complaint that we get. I know of several other parks that I've talked to their neighborhood associations that say the same thing, that, you know, people park along the roadway and play their music, or they're going in, you know, and partying at night. Kind of like the smoking ban right now, we have no enforcement.
Right.
If they're on the roadway, as I've told the other homeowners associations and CPOs I've talked to about this, if they're on the roadway, they need to be calling the law enforcement. The law enforcement is going to be the agency that deals with people parking and partying on roadways if they respond. If they're in a park, again, right now, until we get our posted hours at all of our facilities, if they're in the park, there's not a whole lot we can do about it unless somebody calls, again, law enforcement about noise complaints or fire, you know, illegal fires, things like that. I would be hesitant, just as a general statement, to consider gating all of the parks that have negative behavior. North Clackamas Park is a unique facility in that it's a multi-use, very large acreage, connected to all kinds of other things, and has its own property. There are examples, but that could be a very I know it's very expensive and slippery slope to be getting down, knowing that whether it's COVID or for whatever other reason, the perception is that things have increased recently in those nighttime, evening hour behaviors. And from a Parks District perspective, there's not a whole lot we can do as far as curbing that. But I at the very least wanted to let you know, Riverville is not the alone. There are several other neighborhoods that I've heard the same
It's summer.
types of complaints.
Okay. Is that it? Are you done, Anita?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yes, Joel, please.
I know Commissioner Savas threw something in chat there as far as hours of operations for the park that I didn't want that to get lost in the shuffle because it pertains to Anita's comment. Maybe Michael could talk to that. Is it a dusk to dawn or?
Right now, I believe there's only, and maybe if Candy is on, because I'm not sure park wide. I believe we only have certain parks that have posted hours, but not all parks have posted hours. We do have all the parks right now, have things like no camping allowed, but I don't know that we actually have posted hours in all of the parks. That was part of that new signage that we were talking about, was trying to set essentially a dusk to dawn, or like 11 a.m. to 5 or 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. Closure time.
Well, I don't know if that addresses Commissioner Savas' question. I just didn't want it to get lost. My report was actually to didn't mean to cut anything off there, Michael, if you weren't done, but the Clackamas County Advisory Board to the Milwaukee Community Center, a board of which I'm a member, is still recruiting another seat for our board. So I would encourage any and all of you to share with your groups or spheres of influence, anyone that's interested in learning more about the Milwaukee Community Center and all the really terrific resources and programs that they provide, should come check out one of our meetings. We're actually meeting this Friday, 9:30. We meet the second Friday of every month at 9:30, and it's a great opportunity to get involved on a different layer. So please come on by.
Thank you, Joel. Yes, Mike?
Just to draw your attention to the chat, Candy chimed in. So we do have a rule, apparently, for it's dusk to dawn for parks, but not all the parks have signage letting people know of that. So that's part of what we're working on.
Cool. So in the issue about dusk to dawn instead of no camping, that could be included for putting those signs up in most of the park. Yes, no? I mean, I'm not mandating, but it could be considered.
Yeah, no, that was our intent, was to get the money that we've got in our capital repair and replace budget for the signage, was to put them in all of our parks.
Cool. All right. There you go, Anita. Results already. Is your hand up again?
Yeah, actually, I'm just trying to, I need some help on what to tell the people who've approached me. There is a closure sign in the Riverville Park. I think it's the dusk to dawn thing. So, and there are gates that already exist, but they never get closed. So help me here. What am I going to tell people?
My suggestion, if they're breaking the law, they should just call the police or the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. Other than that, there's not a lot you can do.
Is it breaking the law to be in the park past the
Closing hours? Yeah.
Is that a law?
It's trespassing.
It's a gray area of whether they're trespassing because we have signs that say dusk to dawn, etc. But really, if there's negative behavior, I mean, if it's just people are out enjoying themselves and being respectful of others, that's usually not the problem. It's when there's loud music, that's a noise violation, and the police can respond. I'm going to tell you they probably won't, but they can respond to noise complaints.
Right.
They can respond to illegal fires, and maybe they would be more inclined to respond to those if it was something that was close to structures.
Right.
But in general, that is the agency that needs to handle those. Now, the issue of putting a gate up or a motorized gate or something like that, I'm more than willing to talk to some of the folks in the area about mechanisms of safety, as I have with some of the other organizations. But as far as curbing the actual behavior, it's still going to always defer to the law enforcement to come and break up those kinds of things.
Okay, so the at some point the gates were built and set up there, but they're just always open. So
I'll follow up with Kevin and staff and figure out, because again, I'm just now getting familiar with where all of the parks are,
sure.
and all of their unique issues. Let me follow up with them. Either we'll send you an email, send an email update to everybody just to kind of explain, or we'll discuss it at next month's meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita. Yes, Masiri.
Yes, so it is the summer, that's true, but also I hope we're not turning into a place where we just gate things off because we have a bunch of rambunctious kids. Maybe I'm the youngest one, so I can remember what my youth was. Maybe I'm still a hooligan too, but I hope have these neighbors tried talking to these youth? Are they dangerous? Are they wielding knives and weapons? Have they asked them to turn their music down? Because calling the police, who I hope have better things to do than harass a bunch of young kids about their loud music in modified vehicles, is, I hope, the last thing we're considering here. And they should just get up out of bed and talk to these people. Just throwing that out there.
Yay.
Well, just anecdotally, oh, excuse me, you didn't recognize me, but may I speak?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, anecdotally, one of the residents who lives in a senior living home, which is the closest building to the park, said that whenever he has gone to talk to kids there and asked them in a very polite way, a friendly way, could you turn your music down? They've been very obliging.
Yes.
The thing about racing up and down the hill, it's sort of like it's already too late once they've done that. They're gone, and with the loud muffler modification. I talked to one of the maintenance people, George. I think it's George. Yeah, he said, this is the lover's lane. And I was thinking, hey, high school kids, they need a lover's lane. How many places can they go to park with their sweetheart? They kind of need this, so I was feeling pretty ambivalent about the gate being closed and just wish that I could stop the noise part of it. So anyway. So yeah, it's complexity, of course.
Great. Thank you.
I just want to say I really support with what Mr. said, and remember being young and having a great time at the river at after hours parks when I was a teenager. Not to say that that's not completely frustrating to neighbors, but young people do have to have things to do, and if the worst thing people are doing is having a loud car and listening to music, I think that that's pretty okay. Not to say that those things aren't frustrating to neighbors, but we have to keep that perspective in mind that young people are going to do things like that.
Yeah. Thank you. I actually want to reinforce my own version of what Missouri recommended, because around here, we have cars doing stuff and I talk to them and we have it's a great conversation. I don't go talk to them and yell at them. I go talk to them. So I understand. I did, but here's the deal. A dog got hit here. That's why we have the speed bumps here. And could you just find a different place to do that besides here? Because it's not safe. And thank you. And it's remarkable how the difference it makes having those kind of conversations. So, and I have 25 years working with teenagers, so I have a lot of experience and it works. So thank you. Any other hands on whatever part we're on? The comments or it's called DAC member reports. Okay, we're done with that. And then now we go to the part that I was giving accolades for, district monthly report.
I don't have anything to add unless anybody had any questions about anything in the report. And thank you, Grover, for the kudos. The staff always likes to hear that people are reading our reports.
Absolutely. I do have one on the marketing one, because I did have a question where it said that the main NCPRD brochure is being updated with a refreshed design. And all I want to know is from the perspective of the sub areas and the attempt and the not mandated, the approved plan from the board of directors as far as having us over with a volunteer implementation team, et cetera, growing the 4 sub areas. Do we have anything that's going in there to talk about this change? And good news, and the system plan's coming, and you have 2 local representatives. Is any of that being included in
No.
this design?
With what you're specifically referencing, this is purely our marketing piece that talks about our amenities, our facilities, our parks. It's not the looking forward, here's what's coming, et cetera. This is purely, we've got a main Parks and Recreation brochure that is just in need of essentially an aesthetic and information update, which is what is referenced in that report.
Okay, I get it. So my only comment about that is, and I appreciate that, so it's not a fit, but the likelihood is if we ever have a hope of going to be an independent district, we need to keep including more people in the involvement and so on and so forth. So that's what the attempt of having this kind of more interface, and that's a model that worked before and we'd like to. So not for that one, but in the future, if there's ways to include that, like when they're doing the maps as part of the SDC thing, is that making a distinction on what sub areas are in so we can look for, as well as the part about the economics and the other things that Missouri and others talked about being included in that.
And I want to make sure that we clarify that. Absolutely not. The SDC methodology, because you all told them to look at a non-zonal levelized district-wide methodology,
Correct.
is not making any distinctions between zone or sub area 1, sub area 2.
Correct.
Those, to remind everybody, are purely based on population breakouts of about 22,000 people per sub area. It's not political representation.
No.
It's not any of that. So it's not going to be calculated into SDC methodology at all. This is the SDC methodology is looking at the district overall and the inputs that are put in. Your sub areas are for your own use to build advocacy within those areas based on the boundaries and lines that were drawn based on population.
Right, and they were actually they are on census tracts, so we don't just cut through census tracts. So
right.
It is aligned with that kind of stuff, and if they're going to do all that study, it would be helpful to, much like the request about having the maps that show where the parks are, that we could distinguish which parks are in which sub area going forward, just to help flesh that out, as well as the economics in each of the sub areas, et cetera. So it may not fit there as well. I'm just looking for opportunities, and I don't mean to suggest it was a good fit, but if you don't ask, you don't know. Okay, thank you for that. All right, let's see. That brings us down to the bottom of the page. Future dates are for the next meeting, which is coming up in September. The submission for the agenda is no later than August 17th at 5 p.m. And the next agenda setting meeting is going to be on Monday, August 22nd. It doesn't have a time, so we'll talk about that. And we find out if Ryan can be part of that. I hope we can do that. And then the DAC meeting is going to be September 14th. On the agenda are park-wide smoking ban. So we're going to talk about that again there, or did we push that farther out?
It may wind up being pushed further out. We were just guessing at what might be coming up. So
yeah, I was hopeful.
Yeah. But the main topic, and we want to try and keep other agenda items fairly limited, because the main item, I think, is going to be FCS's SDC presentation.
Excellent, thank you. Well, thanks for the loyal crew that stayed to the end. It's not a bitter end, it's to the end. Thank you for that. And is there any further business for the good of the order? We are adjourned. Time is 7:40.
Thank you.